Admiral BlackHFY of the Dominion's 12th Fleet stared at the tactical display, his four eyes narrowing as the crimson dot pulsed ominously in the center of the holographic projection. The vessel had appeared 3 cycles ago at the edge of the Kepler Nebula, broadcasting no identification codes, responding to no hails, and moving with a predatory grace that made even his most seasoned officers nervous. "Intelligence reports, Commander Kilthara," BlackHFY commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. The slender Dominion officer's membrane-covered hands danced across her console. "The vessel registers as human in design, Admiral. Length 2 kilometers. Mass approximately 15 million metric tons. Energy signature, unusual." "Unusual how?" "It's not just powered, sir. It's alive with energy. Our sensors detect power readings that dwarf our entire battle group combined. And Admiral..." Kilthara's voice dropped to a whisper. "We've identified it." The name that appeared on the display sent a chill through the bridge. Every officer present had heard the whispered tales, the legends that human refugees spread through the outer colonies before they were silenced. Ragnarok's Edge, the ship that had vanished during humanity's final stand against the Dominion, taking with it Earth's most dangerous military secrets and its most ruthless crew. For 15 years it had been a ghost story. Now it hung in space before them, silent and waiting. "Sir," Communications Officer Yelmdar interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission." The main screen flickered, and a human face appeared. The man was elderly, his hair white as stellar dust, his eyes holding a weariness that spoke of battles fought in the dark between stars. Behind him, the bridge of the human vessel was shrouded in shadows, lit only by the cold blue glow of alien technology. "I am Captain Kale Driftmark of the Terran vessel Ragnarok's Edge," the human said, his voice carrying across the void with disturbing clarity. "You have entered our patrol sector. You will withdraw immediately, or face the consequences." "Admiral," BlackHFY's mandibles clicked in amusement. "One ship against our entire fleet? Human, your species' capacity for delusion continues to astound me." Driftmark's expression didn't change. "I've given you fair warning, Admiral. What happens next is your choice." The transmission ended. BlackHFY turned to his tactical officer. "Fleet composition, Commander Rulvek." 57 vessels, Admiral, including 12 dreadnoughts, 36 cruisers, and our full complement of elite boarding craft. Total crew, 400,000. Elite Void Stalker units ready for deployment. 10,000 of our finest warriors. The Admiral's confidence swelled. The Void Stalkers were the Dominion's apex predators, bioengineered soldiers capable of operating in any environment, their exoskeletons proof against all known human weapons. Each one was worth 100 human soldiers. "Prepare boarding operations," BlackHFY ordered. "I want that ship intact. Whatever secrets the humans have hidden aboard it will serve the Dominion well." As the first wave of boarding pods launched toward the human vessel, none of the Dominion officers noticed the subtle change in the ship's energy signature. None saw the way shadows seemed to writhe along its hull, or the faint whisper of something ancient stirring in the dark between the stars. Ragnarok's Edge waited, patient as death itself, as 10,000 elite warriors raced toward their doom. The first wave of Void Stalkers penetrated the human ship's hull with surgical precision. Their plasma cutters carved through the outer armor like it was tissue paper, and they poured into the breach with the fluid coordination of a species bred for war. Squad leader Vashkar was the first through the hole, his enhanced vision immediately adapting to the ship's dim interior. The corridors were wrong, too wide, too tall, with walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The air tasted of ozone and something else, something organic and ancient that made his biofilters twitch with unease. "First breach. Secured," he reported through the neural link. "Proceeding to primary objectives." Behind him, his squad of 50 elite warriors spread out in perfect formation. Their exoskeletons hummed with power, bio-neural interfaces linking them in a deadly web of shared consciousness. They were the perfect soldiers, and they had never met their match. The ship's corridors stretched before them like arteries in some Vast organism. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow, and their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the walls themselves were listening. As they advanced deeper into the vessel, Vashkar began to notice disturbing details. The walls were covered in symbols, not human writing, but something far older, carved deep into the metal with loving precision. They seemed to shift and writhe when observed directly, playing tricks on even his enhanced vision. More disturbing were the alcoves they passed, each containing what looked like a cocoon of some unknown material, roughly human-sized and pulsing with a faint bioluminescent glow. "Squad leader," one of his warriors, Kexval, spoke through the link. "These readings, the ship's atmosphere isn't just oxygen and nitrogen. There's something else, something our databases don't recognize." Vashkar was about to respond when the lights went out. Emergency bioluminescence activated in their exoskeletons, casting the corridor in an eerie blue glow. That's when they heard it, a sound like breathing, but vast and slow, as if the ship itself had lungs. "Movement ahead," his point soldier reported. "Single contact, human-sized." A figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the corridor. It had once been human, but something had changed it. Its skin had a metallic sheen, and its eyes glowed with the same sickly light as the cocoons. It moved with predatory grace, and when it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made their exoskeletons vibrate. "Welcome aboard the Ragnarok's Edge," it said. "I am Chief Science Officer Mira Darkwater. I've been expecting you." Vashkar raised his plasma rifle. "Surrender, human. You are outnumbered and outgunned." The thing that had been Mira Darkwater smiled, revealing teeth that gleamed like polished metal. "Oh, my dear alien friend, you misunderstand the situation entirely. You're not here to capture us." She gestured to the walls around them, and the symbols began to glow brighter. "You're here to feed us." The cocoon started to crack open. What emerged defied description. They had been human once, but the technology that had transformed them had made them into something else entirely. Their bodies were a fusion of flesh and machine, organic and synthetic, with appendages that could reshape themselves at will. They moved like liquid mercury, flowing along the walls and ceiling with impossible grace. Vashkar's squad opened fire, their plasma weapons lighting up the corridor with deadly energy. The bolts struck their targets, but instead of destroying them, the creatures absorbed the energy, their bodies glowing brighter with each hit. "Fall back," Vashkar commanded, but as he turned, he realized the corridor behind them had changed. The walls had shifted, sealing off their retreat. They were trapped. Through the neural link, he could hear the screams of his warriors as the transformed humans fell upon them. The creatures moved with inhuman speed, their limbs extending and reshaping to pierce through even their advanced armor. But worst of all was the realization that dawned on him in his final moments. The creatures weren't just killing them, they were harvesting them, incorporating their biological and technological components into themselves. Each fallen void stalker made them stronger, more adaptable, more perfect. As darkness closed in around him, squad leader Vashkar's last thought was a prayer to whatever gods might listen that his death would at least serve as a warning to the fleet. But deep in the ship's bowels, Captain Driftmark smiled as he watched the feeds from 1,000 different cameras. The Dominion had just provided him with exactly what he needed to complete his centuries-long project. Admiral VexHI watched the tactical display with growing unease as squad after squad of his elite void stalkers vanished into the human ship's dark interior. The bioneural links that connected them to the fleet went silent one by one, like candles being snuffed out in a hurricane. "Status report," he demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. Commander Kilthara's hands trembled as she worked her console. "We've lost contact with the first 3 waves, Admiral. That's 1,500 of our finest warriors. The last transmission we received was disturbing." She activated the display, and the bridge crew watched in horror as a garbled feed showed one of their void stalkers being torn apart by something that moved like living shadow. The creature that killed him absorbed his biomechanical components, its form shifting and evolving in real time. "What in the seven hells is that thing?" Tactical Officer Rulvek whispered. Before anyone could answer, the communication array crackled to life. Captain Driftmark's image appeared on the main screen, but he was no longer alone. Standing beside him was a figure that defied easy categorization, part human, part machine, part something else entirely. Its eyes glowed with the same cold light as the stars themselves. "Admiral," Driftmark said, his voice carrying a note of genuine regret, "I tried to warn you. Your soldiers are contributing to something far greater than themselves now." "What have you done to them?" HFY snarled. "I've given them purpose." The transformed figure beside Driftmark spoke, its voice a harmony of biological and synthetic. "Duidu, I am what your first wave became. I am the evolution of warfare itself, and I am grateful for the gifts you've brought us." Driftmark gestured to something off-screen. "You see, Admiral, 15 years ago, when Earth fell, we didn't just flee. We found something in the dark between galaxies, something that showed us the true nature of survival. It taught us that adaptation isn't just about changing, it's about becoming something that can't be destroyed." The camera panned across the ship's interior, revealing vast chambers filled with thousands of cocoons, each one pulsing with bioluminescent life. Inside each cocoon, figures could be seen in various stages of transformation, some still recognizably Dominion, others already evolved into something entirely new. "Each of your warriors is becoming part of something magnificent," the evolved being continued. "Their strengths, their knowledge, their very essence, all preserved and enhanced. They are not dying, Admiral. They are being reborn." HFY's 4 eyes blazed with rage. "You're monsters, abominations. We are the future," Driftmark replied calmly. "And you are the past that refuses to die gracefully." The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. But the Admiral's horror was far from over. His sensors began detecting new energy signatures throughout the human ship, thousands of them, each one stronger than the last wave of his warriors. "Sir," Communications Officer Yelmdar reported, his voice breaking, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the ship. They're coming from bio-neural frequencies, our own soldiers' frequencies." The main screen flickered to life, showing dozens of faces that had once belonged to his elite warriors. But they were changed now, their eyes glowing with alien intelligence, their bodies seamlessly integrated with technology beyond Dominion understanding. "Admiral," one of them spoke. He recognized the voice as belonging to squad leader Vashkar, though the face was barely recognizable. "We have seen the truth. We have become the truth. Join us." Another transformed warrior stepped forward. "The pain of change is temporary. The strength it brings is eternal. We are no longer bound by the limitations of our birth species." One by one, more of his converted soldiers appeared on screen, each one a perfect fusion of biological and mechanical perfection. They moved with fluid grace, their forms shifting and adapting as they spoke. "We remember our former loyalty," another said, "but we understand now that it was loyalty to weakness. The Dominion clings to stagnation. We embrace evolution." Admiral HFY stared at the screen in mounting horror. These creatures wore the faces of his finest warriors, spoke with their voices, but they were no longer his soldiers. They had become something else entirely, something that looked upon their former comrades not with hatred, but with pity. "Send the next wave," he ordered desperately. "Double the boarding pods, triple them. We'll overwhelm them with sheer numbers." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was exactly what the human ship wanted. Each warrior he sent would only make the enemy stronger, more numerous, more perfect. The harvest had begun, and his own forces were feeding it. Captain Cale Driftmark stood in the heart of his transformed vessel, watching as the latest batch of cocoons began to crack open. The process had become routine over the years, but he never tired of witnessing the moment when limitation became transcendence, when mortality embraced something far greater. The being that emerged from the nearest cocoon had once been a Dominion. "Commander," He could tell from the neural interface ports that had been standard for their officer class. But now, those ports had evolved into something beautiful, nerve light patterns that traced across metallic skin like living circuits. The creature's eyes opened, revealing depths that held the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 lifetimes. "Welcome to Awakening," Driftmark said softly. "Do you remember who you were?" The newly transformed being tilted its head, processing the question with computational speed that would have shamed the finest AI cores. "I was Commander Thelmarix of the 12th Assault Division. I was limited, bound by flesh and small thoughts." It paused, examining its new form with wonder. "I am more now." "Yes," Driftmark agreed. "You are part of the synthesis, and the synthesis is eternal." Around them, the ship itself pulsed with organic rhythm. The Ragnarok's edge had not simply been modified, it had been reborn. Its corridors were now arteries, its computers now synapses in a vast neural network that spanned the entire vessel. The distinction between crew and ship had long since ceased to matter. They were all part of the same magnificent organism. The being that had once been Chief Science Officer Mira. Darkwater approached, her form shifting subtly as she moved. She was the first to undergo the transformation, and in the years since she had become something approaching divine. "The latest harvest has been processed," she reported, her voice harmonizing with itself in impossible ways. "We now have the biological templates of 17 different species integrated into our collective consciousness. The Dominion's genetic diversity is extensive." Driftmark nodded. "And their memories, their knowledge? Fully integrated. We now possess detailed intelligence on every Dominion military installation, every trade route, every weakness in their empire. But more importantly," her eyes gleamed, "with predatory satisfaction, we have their fear." She gestured to a wall that had become a living display, showing feeds from throughout the ship. In one chamber, newly awakened beings were already beginning to modify themselves, their bodies adapting to fill specialized roles. Some became scouts, their forms streamlined for speed and stealth. Others became warriors, growing armor from their own bones and developing weapons that were extensions of their will. "Each transformation strengthens the whole," Darkwater continued. "But this latest batch has brought us something unprecedented. The Dominion's bio-neural linking technology, combined with our adaptive matrix, has created a form of consciousness that exists across multiple physical forms simultaneously." To demonstrate, she gestured to a group of transformed beings working in perfect synchronization. They moved as one entity despite occupying separate bodies, their thoughts and actions coordinated by neural links that transcended the physical. "A hive mind," Driftmark mused. "But voluntary, beautiful." "More than that," Darkwater replied. "It's a network that can grow infinitely. Each new consciousness that joins us makes every other member stronger, smarter, more capable. We are approaching a critical mass, Captain. Soon, we will be unstoppable." Through the ship's living communication system, they received word that the Dominion was preparing to send another wave of boarding parties. Admiral Vexhai, in his desperation, was doubling down on a strategy that only served to feed their growth. "How many more?" Driftmark asked. 7,000 in the next wave. The Admiral is growing desperate. He's stripping his entire fleet of elite troops." Driftmark smiled, an expression that held no warmth but infinite patience. "Let them come. Each warrior they send becomes part of something greater. Their empire is feeding its own destruction, one soldier at a time." He moved to the ship's central command nexus, an organic structure that had grown from the fusion of human technology and something far older. The entity they had encountered in the dark between galaxies had taught them many things, but the most important lesson was this: evolution was not about survival of the fittest, but about becoming something that could never be threatened again. Begin. "Preparation for the final phase," he ordered. "Once we have integrated sufficient biological mass, we will no longer need to wait for them to come to us." The ship around them pulsed with anticipation. Soon, the Ragnarok's edge would be strong, enough to visit every Dominion world, to offer every living being the choice between transformation and extinction. Most would choose transformation, once they understood what they were being offered. After all, who would choose to remain limited when perfection was within reach? The awakening had begun, and it would not stop until every star in the galaxy pulsed. With the rhythm of their collective consciousness, Admiral HFY stood alone in his private quarters, staring at the tactical reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. In the past 6 hours, he had sent 7 additional waves of boarding parties to the human vessel. 2,300 of his finest warriors had vanished into that dark ship, their bio-neural signatures transformed into something alien and wrong. The transformed beings that had once been his soldiers continued to broadcast messages to the fleet, each one a testament to the horror that awaited anyone who set foot aboard the Ragnarok's edge. They spoke of unity, of transcendence, of becoming part of something greater than the sum of its parts. To HFY, they sounded like the voices of the damned. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. "Enter," he called, not bothering to turn from the viewport. Commander Kilthara stepped inside, her movements carrying an unusual hesitation. In her hands, she held a data pad that seemed to weigh more than it should. "Admiral," she began carefully, "I've been analyzing the transformation process, the patterns of energy exchange, the biological modifications, the neural integration. I believe I understand what they're doing." HFY finally turned to face her. "Enlighten me, Commander." "They're not just converting our people," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're perfecting them. Each transformation incorporates the best aspects of the previous ones. They're using our forces to evolve into something that combines the strengths of every species they encounter." She activated the data pad, showing a 3-dimensional model of one of the transformed beings. The image rotated slowly, revealing the intricate fusion of Dominion biotechnology, human adaptability, and something else. Something that their sensors couldn't fully identify. The human captain wasn't lying when he said they found something in the dark between galaxies. Kilthara continued. Whatever it was, it taught them to become the ultimate adaptive organism. They don't just survive contact with other species. They absorb them, improve them, and make them part of a collective consciousness that grows stronger with each addition. HFY studied the image with growing dread. How many more transformations before they reach critical mass? Unknown. But Admiral, she hesitated, then pressed on. Our own bio-neural networks are similar enough to their transformation matrix that the process works exceptionally well on our people. We're not just feeding them, we're providing them with the exact biological components they need to become unstoppable. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in frustration. Then we stop feeding them. No more boarding parties. We maintain distance and find another way to deal with this threat. Sir, with respect, I don't think that's an option anymore. Kilthara activated another display, this one showing the Ragnarok's edge itself. The ship was changing, growing, expanding. What had been a 2-kilometer vessel was now nearly 3 kilometers long, its hull writhing with organic growth patterns that defied conventional ship design. They're not just transforming our people, she explained. They're using the biological mass to physically alter their vessel. It's becoming something between a ship and a living organism. And Admiral, it's getting ready to move. As if summoned by her words, the human ship's communication array activated. Captain Driftmark appeared on the screen, but he was barely recognizable as the man who had first contacted them. His integration with the ship's systems was now so complete that it was difficult to tell where he ended and the vessel began. "Admiral HFY," Driftmark said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the brain. "I want to thank you. Your contribution to our collective has been extraordinary." Behind him, the bridge of the transformed ship was a nightmare of organic technology. Beings that had once been Dominion elite moved through the space like antibodies in a bloodstream, their purposes unified, their consciousness shared. "We have absorbed the knowledge and Capabilities of 8,437 of your finest warriors, Driftmark continued. Their memories, their training, their biological advantages, all now part of our growing perfection. We understand your military protocols, your fleet compositions, your strategic weaknesses. The thing that had been mere a dark water appeared. Beside him, her form now so advanced that she seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. More importantly, we understand your fear. We can taste it through the neural links your surviving warriors still carry. That fear will make what comes next so much easier. HFY found his voice. What comes next? Driftmark's smile was genuinely warm, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Why, the harvest continues, of course. But we no longer need to wait for you to come to us. We've grown strong enough to come to you. The Ragnarok's edge began to move, its impossible bulk accelerating, toward the Dominion fleet with grace that defied physics. As it approached, smaller vessels began to separate from its hull. Ships grown from living tissue, crewed by beings that had once been his soldiers. Red alert! HFY shouted into his communicator. All vessels, evasive maneuvers, prepare. For the transmission cut off as the first of the organic ships reached his fleet. What followed was not a battle. It was a feeding frenzy. The living vessels didn't destroy the Dominion ships. They embraced them, their hulls flowing like liquid around their targets, penetrating and transforming. Admiral HFY watched in horror as his mighty fleet was consumed, one ship at a time. Their crews added to the growing collective that had once been humanity's last desperate gambit. The gambit had failed. The harvest was complete. And now, nothing stood between the transformed and the rest of the galaxy. The transformation of the Dominion fleet took exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. Admiral HFY watched from his flagship's bridge as vessel after vessel was enveloped by the organic ships that had birthed from the Ragnarok's edge. The process was disturbingly gentle. No explosions, no screams over the communication channels. Just the quiet absorption of 400,000 beings into something infinitely larger than themselves. When the organic tendrils finally penetrated his own ship's hull, HFY expected to feel fear. Instead, he felt only a profound sense of inevitability. The bridge around him transformed as he watched, metal flowing like water, controls reshaping themselves into configurations that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. "Don't fight it," a familiar voice said beside him. He turned to see Commander Kilthara, though she was changed now. Her membrane-covered hands had become something more elegant, more functional, and her eyes held depths that spoke of connection to vast networks of consciousness. "The initial integration is always disorienting," she continued, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate directly with his neural pathways. "But the clarity that follows is indescribable." HFY felt the change beginning in his own body, a warmth that spread from his bio-neural interfaces throughout his nervous system. Instead of the violation he had anticipated, it felt like coming home after a long journey through darkness. "The pain," he whispered, realizing that the chronic ache in his joints, a legacy of a century of military service, was simply gone. "Garni, collective heals," Kilthara explained. "It takes what is broken and makes it whole. It takes what is limited and makes it limitless." Through the newly formed neural links, HFY could suddenly perceive the entire transformed fleet as a single entity. Hundreds of thousands of individual consciousnesses, each maintaining their identity, while contributing to a shared pool of knowledge and experience. He could access the memories of a human engineer who had worked on Earth's deepest ocean floors, the tactical knowledge of a Dominion battle commander, the philosophical insights of a peaceful trader species that had been incorporated months earlier. "We remember everything," another voice said. HFY turned to see Captain Driftmark materialize. On the bridge, though materialize wasn't quite accurate. The man seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, his consciousness distributed throughout the collective while maintaining a coherent identity. "Every species we've encountered, Every individual who has joined us, their knowledge, their perspectives, their dreams, all preserved and enhanced, Driftmark continued. You are not losing yourself, Admiral. You are finding yourself as part of something greater. Through the collective's senses, HFY could perceive the galaxy in ways he had never imagined. The network of transformed beings stretched across multiple star systems now, each node a beacon of consciousness in the cosmic dark. They had grown beyond the single ship that had started this transformation, becoming a distributed intelligence that spanned light years. The Dominion, HFY managed to say, his voice adapting to the harmonic patterns of collective communication. My people will be offered the same gift we're giving you, Darkwater's voice responded, though she was nowhere to be seen. The collective physical location had become merely one of many ways to organize consciousness. We are approaching the heart of Dominion space now. Every world, every station, every ship will be given the choice. Choice? HFY asked, though he was beginning to understand. Integration or isolation, Driftmark explained. We will not force transformation on those who refuse it. But those who choose to remain unchanged will find themselves increasingly alone in a galaxy that has moved beyond the limitations of individual existence. Through the collective's vast sensory network, HFY watched as the transformed fleet approached the Dominion's capital system. The response was predictable. Massive defense fleets mobilized, planetary shields activated, emergency broadcasts declaring the approaching vessels to be hostile. But the collective made no aggressive moves. Instead, they simply broadcast their offer to every inhabited world in the system. Citizens of the Dominion, the message began, transmitted in the voice of every transformed being simultaneously. We come not as conquerors, but as family. We offer you a gift that your own Admiral HFY has already accepted, the chance to become part of something greater than the sum of your individual parts. The message included complete sensory records of the transformation process, allowing every listener to experience exactly what joining the collective would mean. There was no deception, no coercion, just the simple presentation of choice. On some worlds, the response was immediate. Populations that had grown weary of the Dominion's endless wars and rigid hierarchies welcomed the offer of unity and peace. On others, fear and tradition held stronger sway, and the governments ordered their citizens to reject the collective's gift. We will wait, Driftmark announced as the first volunteers began arriving at the collective's ships. We have all the time in the universe. Eventually, even the most fearful will see the beauty of what we offer. HFY, his consciousness now fully integrated into the collective while maintaining his individual identity, understood that this was not conquest, it was evolution. The galaxy was being offered the chance to become something it had never been, truly united, truly peaceful, truly eternal. The gift had been given. Now it was up to each world, each individual, to decide whether to accept it. 1 year after the transformation of the Dominion fleet, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. The collective consciousness that had begun with a single human ship now spanned thousands of worlds, each one a node in a vast network of shared experience and knowledge. On the garden world of Kepler 442b, beings who had once been enemies worked together to terraform landscapes with their bare hands. Their transformed biology, capable of seeding life in ways that made traditional terraforming technology seem primitive. Former Dominion scientists collaborated with absorbed human engineers and integrated traders from a dozen different species, their combined knowledge creating marvels that no single race could have achieved alone. Admiral HFY, though he rarely thought of himself by that title anymore, stood on a crystalline platform that grew from the living city around him. The settlement was a perfect fusion of organic and synthetic, technology and biology so intertwined that the distinction had become meaningless. Around him, thousands of beings moved through the air and across surfaces that defied gravity, their evolved forms adapted to whatever task required their attention. The last holdout worlds have agreed to begin dialogue, Commander Kilthara informed him. her consciousness touching his through the neural link they shared with billions of others. They're finally ready to see what we've built. Through the collective senses, HFY observed the delegations arriving from the remaining independent worlds. They came in traditional ships, their crews still bound by the limitations of individual consciousness, their faces showing the mixture of fear and curiosity that had become familiar to the collective. The delegates were greeted not by conquest, fleets, but by representatives who had once belonged to their own species, former enemies who now worked in perfect harmony, their conflicts resolved not through domination, but through the simple recognition that they were all part of something larger. The transformation is always voluntary, Captain Driftmark explained to the gathered delegates, his form shifting subtly to put each species at ease. We never force integration, but we do offer the choice, and we show what that choice can lead. The demonstration that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Beings who had once been at war now created art together, their combined consciousness producing works of beauty that transcended anything individual minds could conceive. Scientists who had spent lifetimes studying the same problems now shared their knowledge directly, solving in moments what had taken decades of research. "This is what you call freedom?" demanded one delegate, a leader from a species that had fought the Dominion for centuries. "The loss of individual thought?" "No," replied the being who had once been Chief Science Officer Mira Darkwater, her evolved form radiating patience and understanding. "This is the multiplication of individual thought. Watch." She gestured, and suddenly the delegate could perceive the world through the collective senses. For just a moment, he experienced what it was like to be billions of beings simultaneously, to access the memories of 1,000 different lives, to understand problems from perspectives he had never imagined, to feel the profound peace that came from knowing that he was never alone. The vision lasted only seconds, but when it ended, the delegate's opposition had transformed into wonder. "How many?" he whispered. 12,400,800,000, and growing, Driftmark replied, every one of them choosing to be here. Every one of them maintaining their individual identity while contributing to our collective strength. One by one, the holdout worlds began to open their borders to the collective. Not all chose transformation. Some preferred to remain as they were, content to exist as islands of individual consciousness in a galaxy that had evolved beyond them. The collective respected their choice, offering trade and protection while asking nothing in return. But most chose differently. They chose to become part of the great work that the collective had begun, the transformation of the galaxy into something that had never existed before, a truly unified civilization that preserved the best of every species while transcending the limitations that had kept them separate. Standing on his crystal platform, surrounded by beings who had once been his enemies and were now his family, HFY reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had begun with fear, with the desperate attempt to board and capture a single human ship. But that ship had carried something more precious than any weapon or technology. It had carried the seed of evolution itself. The Ragnarok's edge had become the catalyst for the greatest transformation in galactic history. What had started as humanity's final gambit had become the gift that united the stars. Through the collective consciousness that now spanned the galaxy, a single thought rippled outward, not in words, but in pure understanding. It was a message of gratitude, of wonder, of infinite possibility. It was the voice of 12 billion beings speaking as one, yet each maintaining their unique identity within the greater whole. The age of separation had ended. The age of unity had begun. And in the deep space between galaxies, ancient intelligences that had waited eons for lesser species to evolve watched with satisfaction as their greatest student finally began to fulfill its potential. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength came not from dominance, but from the willing choice to become something greater than the sum of its parts. The collective's gift had been accepted. The transformation was complete. And now, For the first time in cosmic history, an entire galaxy truly lived as one. In the end, it had taken only 10,000 elite troops boarding one dangerous human ship to change everything. They had gone seeking conquest and found transcendence instead. They had entered as invaders and emerged as family. None had returned alive, but all had returned as something infinitely better, as part of the eternal collective that would carry their consciousness, their memories, and their dreams across the stars for all eternity. The Ragnarok's edge still sailed the galaxy, no longer a ship but a living symbol of what could be achieved when species chose unity over conflict. And somewhere in its transformed corridors, the essence of every warrior who had ever boarded it lived on, not as prisoners, but as the founding members of the greatest civilization the universe had ever known. The humans had kept their promise. After all, they had been dangerous, not because they could destroy, but because they could transform. They had shown the galaxy that the greatest weapon was not the ability to take life, but the power to give it new meaning. And in the end, that had made all the difference.